Thank you. Right, welcome to this meeting of the Connected Communities Scrutiny Committee being held this day, Wednesday, the 5th of April 2026. For those present in the meeting room, if a fire alarm sounds, please leave the building by the nearest exit and make your way to the fire assembly point in the car park. The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. Council is recording this meeting. Others are permitted to film, photograph and record public meetings, providing it does not disrupt the business of said meeting. If there are members of the public present who do not wish to be filmed or photographed, please raise your hand now so that any such person filming or photographing may be made aware. Seeing no hand. Microphone usage. We haven't got any, so we won't be touching on that today. Please ensure that mobile phones, laptops and other devices are turned to silent. For participants in attendance remotely, can I request that you use the raise hand feature? I don't think that's going to be relevant because we haven't got anybody attending remotely. Apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies?
No apologies for absence.
Thank you.
Chair.
So any name substitutes?
No name substitutes.
Okay. Any declarations of interest? Do any members wish to declare any interest in any agenda item that we're discussing this afternoon? Okay. Minutes. The minutes documents of the meeting held on 17th of Feb 2026 is included in the agenda pack, pages 13 to 18. No matters of accuracy have been notified to the monitoring officer. Are you all content that I sign the minutes as an accurate record? Yeah, everyone in agreement? Thank you. I will sign those at the end. Okay. Right, moving on to item 5. Questions from members of the public. To receive any written questions from members of the public. The committee has received 3 questions from members of the public and responses to the questions have been published in supplement 3 to the agenda. The questioner has the opportunity to submit a written supplementary question or join the meeting to ask their supplementary question. Supplementary questions are to be no more than 1 minute in length and must include a question. Can I ask the clerk to confirm if any supplementary questions are to be asked?
Thank you, Chair. So 2 supplementary questions have been received from members of the public. 1 supplementary question has been received from Ms. Martin, and this will firstly be read out by myself. The other supplementary question has been received from Mr. Morietska, and that will be read out by Mr. Morietska afterwards. So I will share on screen Ms. Martin's supplementary question and read it out shortly. Okay, so this is the following supplementary question that's been received from Ms. Martin. ACOB scheme information report published in advance of the Herefordshire Strategic Transport Model (HSTM) indicates that modelling for phase 1 Southern Link includes phase 2 of the Western Bypass in its core scenario, assuming its forecast time savings. However, these were arrived at using a highway assignment model that did not factor in traffic induction for either regional or local network. WSP and Mott McDonald flagged the risk of overstate congestion benefits. Importing these inaccuracies into the SLR modelling risks unreliable journey time forecasts and inaccurate monetized benefits for the SLR's full business case, inflating the SLR's economic case. Will the committee recommend peer review of the HSTM and, if found to be flawed, recommend an updated assessment that accounts for phase 2 traffic induction before the FBC is finalised? If not, why not?
Thank you for that question. I am going to respond to that to say that the purpose of today's meeting is to focus on the assessment criteria that will be used to assess the full business case. Our role is only to consider whether the assessment criteria is robust, transparent, and capable of supporting a sound decision by Cabinet. That question itself, in my opinion, would be better asked of either Cabinet or this committee when we come to look at the full business case. The framing of today's discussion is purely around the assessment criteria. I hope that answers your question. Right, I think, Mrs. Morietska, would you please ask your supplementary question?
Thanks for the correction, because obviously the published agenda was on methodology, so I apologise for my question asked being based on methodology. The auditors issued a damning report on the City Link Road. which was just one element of the Hereford City Centre Transport project. Other non-road elements, including the transport hub, were not delivered due to a lack of funds. If lessons are to be learnt, will the Scrutiny Committee recommend that the assessment criteria include project delivers better value for money per pound compared to alternative transport measures that could achieve the same outcomes? This is what Treasury Green Book refers to. There is sufficient budget and staff experience to manage and control this capital project. That optimum bias is excluded from journey times and the impact of induced demand is included. You'll see that from the post-operating performance evaluation of the City Link Road, that it was heavily overestimated, the journey time savings. And that all costs to deliver the claimed benefits of the scheme, for example, a fully funded programme of mitigation, the long-term maintenance of any planting and rare wildlife relocation that's already been identified, are included in the total costs.
Thank you very much for that question. I can confirm that a couple of the things that you mentioned there have already been discussed in terms of when we were looking at our lines of inquiry. I cannot preempt at this stage what the committee will decide to make as its recommendations. That goes through as part of the democratic process. All I can say is that I hope that over the course of this meeting, the areas that you touch on may well come out through the natural organic discussion conversation we will have as a committee as we interrogate this assessment criteria and come up with a set of agreed recommendations. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. I hope the committee appreciate I've been trying to help with the email I sent earlier as well around the errors on the data. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, questions from members of the council. To receive any written questions from members of the council. The committee has received one question from Councillor David Hitchener, and the response to the question has been published in supplement 4 to the agenda. But I understand that Councillor Hitchener is present and wishes to ask a supplementary question. Councillor Hitchener, would you like to ask your supplementary question?
Yes, thank you, Chair. My point really is about Appendix 1 on page 7, supplement 2, and it relates specifically to the criteria and requirements. So hopefully it's to the point that you made earlier. So the draft methodology statement under the technical assessment criteria and requirements heading refers to modelling results needing to demonstrate improved journey times and no overall reduction in safety. On the journey time element in my written question, I referred to a 7-minute longer journey time on the A465. This is data from the scheme information report from ACOM. Is this to be ignored because only improved times are to be considered? Surely not. The report to this committee, paragraph 16, is selective, referring only to journey time savings on Belmont Tree Avenue, Walnut Tree Avenue, Home Lacey Road and parts of Belmont Road, all of which are of course helpful to support the case of the SLR. There is no reference to any longer journey times. I ask that the committee recommend a more balanced approach rather than one which is so obviously biased towards proving the case for the SLR. Amongst other things, the methodology should look at the effect of longer journey times on the A465, other parts of the Belmont Road within the city boundary, and the A49, and also on the road from Bridge Solars onto the B4352 and 4349 through Madley and Cleahonga. They should look at the longer times, which would apply to all those routes, not just the improved times. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. I'm going to initially answer that in a very similar way to the last question from a member of the public, in that we are looking specifically at the assessment criteria. And I do think that some of the detail that you're looking at would come out once those assessment criteria are being applied to the full business case. So what our job today is to check that the assessment criteria gives opportunity for that to come out prior to the full business case going to cabinet for its decision. So I hope from the discussions we've had around lines of inquiry and the councillors around here, who obviously you know many as well, but some of that detail may well come out over the course of our discussion. But again, we are not going to decide before the meeting what our recommendations are until we've had the discussion. Yeah. So I think I've answered your question.
Well, it's just that the wording here talks about modelling results demonstrate improved.
Councillor Hitchener, you're fully aware of the procedure. I think that's my answer now. And thank you very much for bringing that question to today's screen. Thank you very much. Great. We'll now move on to item 7, which is Herefordshire parking strategy. The purpose of today is to review the council's draft parking strategy. We have an introduction that I understand is going to be from two Herefordshire Council officers, Fiona Horton, who is our Transport Planning Service Manager, and David Land, Head of Transport and Access Services. So over to both of you. Thank you very much.
People open by Chairman, the old people. This is the first draft of this strategy. It's not perfect, but yeah, I'm looking forward to listening to.
Councillor Durkin, could you speak up a little bit?
Yeah.
People at the back can't hear.
Sorry,
Feel free to stand up, anybody, if you wish to. Go back to the old days.
I'm looking forward to the comments and questions that come from your committee, Chair, so that we may make it a better strategy going forward when it goes up to consultation.
Thank you very much, Councillor Durkin. Over to Fiona Horton and David Land. Thank you very much.
Yes, Scrutiny for taking the time to review our parking strategy. This document is to replace the current one, which is 20 odd years old, so it's a bit out of date. Things have changed in the last couple of decades about parking and different ways of working. I hope this represents a shift in how we want to approach our parking proposals, where we want to work with communities, work with members, and do the right things in the right areas. So it's not a punitive approach; it's more of a supportive way of working. We appreciate that our residents and our businesses are struggling at the moment, and the policies to support them. So I'd appreciate any comments about this. Is a draft. We will be going to consultation. A date hasn't been set, so we wanted to, we didn't want to put expectations on dates depending what Scrutiny came back with. So once we've kind of taken on board your comments, we can edit, we can update questions, and then we can see what the public think. So yeah, your comments would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you. I'm keenly aware that our two members of the public are struggling to hear. If you would like to move to those two chairs where for public questions, I'm very happy to use chair's discretion so you can move forward so that you can hear a little bit better. I hope that helps. I want you to feel that you're getting the most you can from them. Okay, thank you very much. David?
Just to echo these sentiments really, Chair. It's a draft. We haven't had one for a long time. We're in the process of developing it. We're keen to listen and hear. This is not a face company in any sense. We are going to take some of your comments to also draft the questions that will inform the consultation, and we've got a consultation for warrants, I think, as soon as we can after on the back of this meeting. Once the cabinet members approves our consultation approach. And yeah, so that's it really. So
I've got lots of questions, but at the start of the report, it talks about consultation. So I'd like to start, if the committee will forgive me, with asking a little bit more. Could you just tell us how you're planning to deliver the consultation? You talk about online consultation materials, and I'd be interested to know what you imagine it's going to look like.
Yeah, so we've been speaking with our comms team, so we want to try something slightly different with our consultation. Plus, it isn't a statutory consultation like a speed limit or traffic regulation order. We want to utilise our social media channels a little bit more. So what we propose to do is do a bit of a trial where we put the questions one by one as well on social media. So Facebook, Instagram, Nextdoor, LinkedIn, and then take the comments that people put on those posts as part of the consultation. I think we'll recognise that a lot of times we get a lot of support for a project on social media, but that doesn't necessarily translate into the formal consultation responses. So while we will definitely be taking formal consultation responses through the online consultation portal, as this isn't a statutory consultation, we're also going to take social media comments. If people want to email in, they'll reach out inbox and email in on. I've also spoken to some of the economic growth team, and we're going to do some target business consultation, where we're going to do online sessions, and if necessary, a session in an in-person one, so the businesses can come and speak to us and give us their comments. So trying to be a bit more proactive. I think if you remember, Chair, you give comments on the LTP consultation response. We've sent it by a month, and we did some more in-person ones. And I think you can see very clearly the demographic of those who responded very much met the same demographic of Herefordshire, and that only happened because we were a bit more proactive. And appreciate the comments and Scrutiny supported that and made that happen. So I think trying to learn from that.
Okay. I asked that. I'm interested to know what kind of materials you're looking at creating. Maybe videos. I mean, just a document like this can be a little bit dry, and if we want to get the best possible spread of responses across, residents of all ages.
Yes.
Are you looking at exploring any more creative ways of engaging with the community?
Yeah, so that will probably come more out of our social media posts, where we will have more images relevant to the question we're asking. If you remember in LTP, we did a young person's questionnaire that was worded differently to allow it to be more accessible for younger people. That's probably what we're going to be doing with the target strategy, to have something targeted more towards businesses that are more relevant to them, and questions and questions more relevant to younger people or people with disabilities, so they can kind of.
Do you know which channels you're going to be using?
At the moment, we're only really looking at still images through social media and the online portal. That would be to take recommendations on.
When you say social media, I mean which social media?
Facebook.
Just Facebook.
Well, we're looking at Facebook and LinkedIn to provide industry kind of comments from people. Other than that, I'm happy to take more. I think we've got a couple of social media channels, but I think the most proactive one happens to be Facebook. I think if it goes on Facebook, it goes on Instagram.
But does this relate to this particular topic? Sorry.
Strategy.
No, to the social, to the
Sorry.
to the consultation. Right. Okay, fine. I just wanted to get into the strategy itself. I've got one or two questions myself, and then we'll open it up to the whole committee, if that's okay. Right. My first question on the strategy itself, thank you for that. That's some clarity, but happy to talk about that and how we might want to look at extending the use of different channels. My initial reaction, is this a one size kind of fits all a little bit in terms of Hereford City and the market towns? It feels that it's primarily based around Hereford City, and how does the strategy differentiate between the needs of Hereford market towns and rural high car dependency areas?
Yeah, so I think throughout the strategy, we've tried to implement or reference enforcement or approaches that are area specific, and we will take guidance from elected members and the public. So if they want us to enforce something a bit more, we will in certain areas. What I haven't separated Hereford from the rest of the county for a number of reasons, but my main one is that if we put initiatives in the city, so we like Christmas free parking, why isn't that free for everyone? So just because we do an initiative in the city, why should the rural market towns not also get the benefits of that?
Well, they do.
And I think we want to be clear that there isn't a difference between them. They're both equally as important. It may be that, we do have certain metrics that are more targeted towards rural. I haven't explicitly put it here because I didn't want to kind of have more of a focus on Hereford rather than market towns, because to me they're equally as important, and the rules should be one size fits all rather than market towns treated a bit differently.
Okay. I think as a policy, there's a bit of a lack of clarity around, I mean, it might seem obvious, but why charges exist in the first place? What's the underlying philosophy for why we have parking charges? Is it purely revenue generation? Is it about demand management? Is it economic support? How is this pricing going to encourage people to stay longer in our towns to support businesses? And how does the pricing strategy balance short stay against long stay?
We can add something in about pricing strategy. This policy isn't referencing pricing, and that is a separate piece of work that is being done. So the only reference to the pricing that we put in is that there would be an annual increase. We've not gone into the granular detail of what car park is being charged, what permit is being charged for, because we wanted to focus on the methodology of parking. But the strategy will last for the same length of time as the LTP, so it's what, 25 years, 15 years. If a new cabinet came in, they might totally change the parking pricing. And I didn't want to make that difficult, because pricing for me is a decision. This is about methodology and how we link in with our other transport strategies like the LTP and LTP.
I think the principle of how we price is different to the principle of why we price.
It doesn't have that.
So I think, Chair, the reason we price, there's like multiple reasons we price. One is to manage demand.
Yep.
Because we have limited spaces.
Yep.
And we want to see some turnover. We don't want cars to just sit there all day long in space. So that helps support local economy, because we want to see some footfall. So we don't want that blocked up. We want to reduce congestion. We want to improve safety. So we think parking charges might help in some ways to discourage car trips. Not always. I probably can't evidence that very strongly, but I think there's some suggestion that's the case. Partly to fund the cost of parking provision. So if we made it free, then actually that would put then we still needed to manage those car parks. That would put a burden on all taxpayers rather than just the people that are using those car parks to park their cars. So that would be an unfair process. And we still want to have access for people to park their cars in the cities and market towns. So I think they're the kind of underlying reasons.
Absolutely. One of the things, I think there's a paragraph or two just explaining, why the decision is made to charge. If we're going to have car parks and we're going to charge for the car parks, why does Herefordshire charge for its car parks?
Yeah.
We should charge for our car parks because we believe it does this, this, and this. Because there will be somebody that says, actually, we shouldn't charge for parking because it would support local economic growth. If there was no car parking charges across the whole of the county, small businesses would be. But I think there's an understanding of the decision and why the decision has been made to charge would be a useful addition to this, rather than just taking it for read that we charge, and that's how it is. Okay. I'll shut up for a second. You've all heard far too much of me. I think Barry was first, then Roger, then Frank. Then Dan. Bruce. Sorry, Bruce. I guess with the B, it's close.
I'd like to look at this.
Yeah, thanks very much. I read your report with some interest. Wasn't much wiser at the end of it. Much that there was no looking back. It's all very well and good. How do we implement this strategy? What I'd like to see somewhere in the report is maybe an addendum or something, be an example of a car park somewhere, off the street car park, for example, big place. How this strategy work with regard to that particular car park? Will it meet all your criteria? Some of these things, they sound good, don't they? Safe, accessible, inclusive parking. It's all very nice. Is that mean? Protects the environment. Well, I don't know. Supports town centres. Well, again, all these sort of things are all well and good. How are they going to work? Is basically the question. With regard to charging strategy, it was always the case, I don't know if it still is, but it was always the case, you could only use revenue gained from car parks for the maintenance of car parks. It's always the case used by previous. It's laid down something. Obviously now we use revenue.
Yeah, if you wanted to come back on any of those.
So you can't use PCN revenue for anything at all. That's really well legislated. We can't spend that on just like car parking is different. Yes, but that's just the.
Yeah, and I suppose this car parking isn't used, so there's not like we have to charge a certain amount, we do it, charging is based on certain criteria, like Dave saying about maintaining having good turnover. Also car parks tend to be slightly cheaper, also car parks more expensive, so that we get higher turnover in the centres, and or people park all day in the kind of. So yeah, I think there is not kind of used as a revenue, but it can be used for something.
As far as motorists are concerned, is that when they come into town, be it a market town or the city, what they're looking for is a parking space available for them that is wide enough so if they put a largish car, you can open the door and get out. Some of them you can't. And when they get value for money, and why do we keep putting the prices? That's the things that worry most people. They're the comments we get parish council meetings.
Thank you, Bruce. I think
Why
Barry
are
wants
so expensive?
Thank you, Bruce. I think Barry wanted to come up.
I want to come just briefly, what's your search?
Sorry,
What's your search for? Road Traffic Regulation Act 1984, section 55.
remember it well.
I know, I'm sure you do. Tell me what it says. What it says is that on-street parking can be used, funding can be used to finance the upkeep of car parks and other matters related to the roads as well, icy conditions. That's what it basically says under those under the act.
Thank you very much.
Roger?
Chairman, I wanted to pick up on the points you were making about, stating the bleeding obvious, but why you do need to charge. Because I do think when people read this document, the problem we have, of course, is balancing the support for the economy, the local businesses, and raising revenue. And it is a difficult one. We went for a long time, of course, freezing our car parking charges, but of course, given the last settlement we had was so awful, we had to return to it. And so, I think you do need to put that in there. Also, I think you need to say some of the other really obvious things is, which people, a lot of people are driving bigger vehicles. So our traditional car parks were not designed for these very large four-wheel drive vehicles. I'm amazed that, people go to Herefordshire and they seem to think they've got to have a four-wheel drive vehicle driving around our lanes and all the rest of it. They are much bigger vehicles. And that, of course, puts extra pressure on space. Well, it doesn't take any more space, but of course you're limited in the amount of space and opening doors if you can't. And to some extent, I think you need to weave that in there because that ain't our fault. That's the fault of manufacturers. But it is a huge problem. You go to Garrick House, you wouldn't want driving other than sober anyway. But by now, if you're in Garrick House, you certainly would, because of the type that's there. And I'm always interested in general information parking. A lot of people say, "Oh, well, there's not enough parks in Hereford." Well, actually, evidence proves that there is enough car parks in Hereford, and I think we'd be robust here that has been shown over the years and at the moment going forward. I think we should help that message because once you go on Facebook, you're going to get the trollers straight away, so you need to be ready for that. The other thing, Chair, and you'll forgive me, but your problem in Hereford City, in particular the market towns, is the elephant in the room. So I'm dealing with a lot of businesses who have had a huge increase in their business rates. It's another nail in their coffin, and they are really exercised about it. And particularly if you're in one of our market towns, you ain't making a fortune running a business and running a retail business in a market town. And then, of course, people pay the premium of paying for their car park to come in and have the privilege of using facilities. Now, in the work that I was doing, I discovered I couldn't find the Herefordshire ones, but the Tesco car park in London had an increase in its business rates of 3%. Now, I appreciate we're talking bigger money, but this was nothing in relation to the 50, 60, 70, and 80% increase in business rates of our smaller businesses. And of course, we know that supermarkets are good here. Because you come there, car parking is free. It's right by the side of the supermarket. And it is killing the high street, along, of course, with online shopping. And that's something that Herefordshire can beat itself up about. That's something big. But is there any way that we can, as I said, this could be on this remit, but we have got to put in some sort of pressure somewhere to say, look, local authorities have got to raise revenue, particularly when they're treated like we've been by this government. And when you see that advantage given to those supermarkets over that. If I'm going to Leominster to do my shopping, I will go to Morrison's. But why do I need to go down the Bargates and go to the rest of the
Councillor Briggs, I fear we're straying into slightly more.
We are, but that again needs some explaining of it.
That's a good point. I think the traditional use of high streets has changed and is continuing changing. Part of that, there's lots of reports and studies done on the art of linger. So what we need to do is encourage people to park and want to spend a long time in where they are, so they don't have to rush back to the car. So most supermarkets now have a maximum 2 hours, so you know you're not going to be spending too long in there. So the strategy looks at things like pay on exit and also having virtual payments. So you can extend your payment on your phone if you've got the app, or if you wanted to pay in more traditional ways like or by the app, you could do a pay on exit. So we suggested that as something we could start trialing. And then the delivery plan, we do look at in the first year doing some trials on that of how we can bring that in. So I think what's important is looking at what other market towns or other cities have done, learning of what's been beneficial to the businesses there, trialing it here. So rather than going and saying we're definitely doing this, let's try some ideas. And I think if we can encourage people to stay that bit longer, the shops that are in the market towns and cities, research would say, have more spend per person because people are staying on because they're not rushing in just to pick up paper, just to pick up 1 or 2 things. They go, do you know what? Should I just go for a coffee? No, I have to rush back to my car park. Hopefully they'll go, yeah, that's fine, it's after later I leave. So make it a bit different. I think also part of what we can offer the supermarkets don't. Supermarkets are very much get as many cars in as possible. What you say about car sizes going up is key. We have referenced in the policy that we're going to make sure that our disabled bays are above the minimum standard where possible. So we can provide high quality car parks. So that is high quality lighting, CCTV where possible, the surface is of no potholes if possible. So the people feel they're getting value for money from our car parks. So it's a positive experience coming into one of our car parks. And you see a very clear difference between a supermarket, you're only allowed 2 hours, yes, squeezing in out your car, your boots are stuck with someone else, it's really tight, there's people walking everywhere. Come to one of our car parks, it's well maintained, lit, you feel safe, your car isn't going to get hit by, because there's going to be an adequate size bay for you to park within. We've also kind of done that as well.
No potholes, that'd be good.
No potholes, yes, and that's part of what Barry was saying about the fact that the money that we get from car parking will be reinvested back into high quality car parks. And this is what the strategy is trying to change that, saying that we know that's charged parking, but let's give our businesses a good chance by giving them a really good car parking arrangement. We've also rolled that into like RVs, so recreational vehicles where people want to come to our beautiful town and have a holiday in their vans. We're talking about providing some good spaces to go to with clean wet water, wastewater facilities, showers, so that they feel that they can come park, pay for something of value, and then spend a large amount of time in our lovely area without having to go to bigger cities, because they find that we don't. This is what we're trying to provide.
Well, for sure, thank you. Councillor Cornthwaite.
Thank you. I want to start positively because on that term, positive parking, because I really do like that phrase and I like what you're trying to achieve. And then just underneath that, it says this will include more visible approach for civil enforcement officers. And I would understand from what I read later, you're going to train and that I think is a great positive. I also wonder if those same civil enforcement officers should not be part of what you're searching into when you're looking at the behaviour of the motorists, because they have first-hand experience of what people are like in car park, and they can also do on-the-ground work for you ahead of that. So if that was part of their training, but it is a great positive to know that they're going to be trained and trained really well. Then there's a couple of points
I really wanted to, I had to look at what does future-proofed parking mean? And while I found out what I think future-proof parking might mean, I would like to hear what you think future-proof parking might mean. And then on the environmental impact, it says these measures reduce officer mileage, minimise resource use, and support lower carbon service delivery. My question would be how?
So one of the things we want to do is provide things like real-time information on what car parks have available spaces. So that reduces people have to drive around the city finding the car park for things. So they know they can just get all these empty spaces in this car park and go to. So I think for future proofing, that's what we're looking to have more interactive information to the public. So whether that's VMS, so visual messaging signs on the approach into market towns or cities to let them know where they can park. Now you can tell people how many parking spaces are available in the car parks. So giving people the ability to just straight to their destination, not have to worry about circling the city, will provide benefits to the environment. For future proofing, what we're looking at is things like people are now traditionally moving away from cash payments. So making sure that we have high quality cashless options. We are proactively looking to join the National Parking Platform. So that would mean that rather than having multiple for each council, there's one app for the whole, every council in the country. So people can move.
It's not, what it means is you can use any app you like wherever you're parked. So you know at the moment we can only use Just Park.
Yes.
So once you join the National Parking Platform, you can still use Just Park, or you can use Ringo, or you can use whatever you want. Yeah. So the council sort of signed up to that. Very happy with it.
Perfect.
Yeah, so we're doing that. I think also things like making sure bays are the right size, the cars get bigger, making sure there's adequate electric charging facilities, because targets on how many cars are there. So making sure that those are what's future proofing. And I think there will be things that come up in the next couple of years that we've not even thought of now. Having a policy that proactively looks at those and allows us to go through our cabinet member and trial things is kind of how I see the future proofing. What I didn't want was policy that said we're going to do this and that's it. That's not the way of the world anymore.
Thank you, Fiona. I think Barry wanted to come in on that.
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of points, if I may, Chairman. Councillor Phillips mentioned raising revenue just now. Under that same act that I regained Councillor Baker with, we don't make revenue, we make if there's a surplus being made, it is reinvested into the car parking setup. Now, it's not about raising revenue for the council, it's about raising revenue to enable the whole car parking system to work. And with regard to paying on apps, that's currently, as you know, we have it here. Currently, and also if you want to extend your time, you can. And the other thing is that we are able to do in Herefordshire is pay by any means, even coins.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. I think Councillor Tornby wanted to come in.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks very much for the report. I've just got a few brief comments, sort of mainly focused on what is important to residents and also suggestions for clarification. So yeah, it's really good that we're signing up to the National Parking Platform. I'm sure that it all makes sense, doesn't it? And I'm sure residents will be pleased about that. Also, naturally, residents' parking zones is something that we hear a lot about our residents. And so in here, we're told that we commit to helping residents process of applying for an RP. So it would be interesting to know a little bit, if not today, as part of the process, how we will be improving this service concretely to residents. Can I keep going on? Yeah. For the pay on exit, yeah, I think residents will be pleased with that too. So I sort of wondering what the main obstacles are to getting on with this, and if that is a question of budget. It's interesting to see reference to the city master plan here. We're told that the strategy aligns with it. But we also know that the new city master plan is emerging. So, we have to be sure that we don't get into some kind of catch-22, don't we, where strategies are all sort of waiting for each other. And I hope that we're looking at ideas from the previous city master plan rather than just dismissing it all out of hand.
And one more thing. On the digital exclusion, which I've just sort of mentioned, the issue of choice, which residents really appreciate as well, the choice. The choice for cash remains, and we hear that a lot from residents who don't want to download an app. You know, that especially residents, should we say, of a certain age, or maybe with certain disabilities. And you know, we're told that this is for our convenience. And we find there's nothing inconvenient about putting £2 coins in the machine. That's not inconvenient for a lot of us. And as I'm sure you're aware, there are campaigns from things like YouTube around this, and you know, I'm sure you're aware, you know, it links into the Equality Act, and you know, there are possibilities of being, you know, of it being indirect discrimination of the Equality Act. So we've got to be aware of that. So it'd be good to see what we're doing about that. And there is mention in the paper, in the report, about our equality duty. So paragraph 18, but digital exclusion isn't mentioned under that paragraph on the equality duty. So it would be good to have something in there, you know, so that we can demonstrate to residents that we do understand, we're aware of their rights, the importance of choice, and what their preferences are, and the law.
Yeah, so I think it doesn't reference it too much because we make it very clear we're not removing the option to pay by cash. So while we would while we encourage cashless parking because our overheads are reduced a bit, there is no current plan to remove cash in option, the reasons we just stated. So that is not at all what the parking strategy is here for. I think we make it quite good visions in there that while we are long-term aims towards cash parking, we're not removing cash. I know some councils have brought in 100% cashless and engagement with cabinet, looking at things, you know, consultation for the LTP or transfer plan. That wasn't what residents wanted, that wasn't what cabinet wanted. We've not even thought about it. So we are not going to be removing the option to pay by cash. That will remain. City master plan, the policy, we've written the policy with the current master plan in mind, and also constantly talking with the team developing the emerging one and making sure that as it stands now, they are aligned. As I said, it may be adopted in different, slightly different, but we can always amend the parking strategy if we need to align a bit closer. But from what I'm seeing, we are going to be, you know, aligned. The main obstacles for pay on exit, we do have an allocated budget within for this year to implement the parking strategy requirements. So at the moment, once the policy is approved, we could go straight ahead to start trialing pay on exit. So there's no obstacle, it's just making sure the cabinet are happy with policy and finding the right car park to try and install and making sure that we're doing it correctly. And then going to residents' parking zones, the strategy did have a very long bit on how to apply residents' parking. And so they reminded me that that probably wasn't the best thing to have in a parking strategy. So it was removed, but it will be on the website explaining very clearly what they've done, what they want to do, and there'll be like a supplementary guide to this. So what we're considering is that we want the local member to support the residents' parking zone. We want a signature list of residents who also agree to it and want us to look at residents parking in their area. And so, and subsequent to that information coming in, we would then do a formal consultation with all affected residents and go forward with it. So
would that then need to go to a TRO?
it would then be a TRO, yes. That'll be the formal part of it. But before we just suddenly do a TRO, we want it to be ensured that there's relative support from residents. And the local member has been consulted on, we can have your comments.
I mean, I've been going through that quite recently, but that's sort of what's happening.
It's not what happened. It's just formalising the process, so it's going to be a very clear guide for residents. So as a elected member, you can, if somebody asks you, say, there's a very clear guide here, and the website will be updated to reflect that.
Thank you. I'm going to touch on a couple of areas. Behaviour change, modal shift. There are some. What are the mechanisms you see within this strategy that are actually going to change travel behaviour, and how will any modal shift that is attributable to this strategy be measured?
So we are currently working through the KPIs for the service following the adoption of two transport strategies, LTP and LCWIP. So we're also doing the same for parking. Modal shift, this thing that we want to do. So this strategy isn't just about cars and cars parking. It also looks at enforcement and what parking can provide. So we go into our bike share scheme. So we've got park and tube sites around the city. We want to expand the offer of those to include buses picking up from those areas, and also car share schemes being expanded to allow people to park there. So the residents, again, the city, money's tight at the moment, allow you to park the car for free on the outskirts of the city, go into your friend's car or your colleague's car, and you both drive in and park one car. So, you potentially halve the cost of your parking every day. So we are looking at different ways to incentivise that change. And I think the park and tube sites are really great.
That's different. Incentivising it is different to measuring it.
So the measurement will be, we have people signed up for the car bike share. So we will see on how that increases rides, the number of rides from to and from our park and tube sites. We currently monitor that every week anyway, so that we could use that as data. We want to look at setting up a proper car share scheme where people register online and they also register their car in that car park to say, I pay car sharing. And we've worked on how the mechanism of that would look, but it would be kind of a scheme that we will look to introduce with registrants. We would ask this specific identity and we think the best monitor. We're also bringing in
that was my next thing. So you can touch on that by thinking, so how often will the strategy be reviewed and how often will the data be published? So as far as that's concerned, so we can get into the nitty gritty of monitoring the results.
There will be an annual report for transport strategies that will be done, and that will include all transport strategies. It'll sit across. So the LTP, the LCWIP, market strategy, and any other emerging strategy that's going to come forward over the next couple of years, there will be one annual report that covers all of the KPIs within there and the performance of those schemes. And we're coming up with a list of those at the moment. They'll be available online when it's published. Internally, we'll be reviewing them monthly because we want to see if things are working. If there's individual trials going on, for example, pre and exit, those KPIs will be done on a more regular basis, will publish more regularly so people can see how they're improving.
Are you looking at that? Will that overarching report, will you be able to attribute any modal shift to individual particular policies like this, or is it like modal shift as a, all the work we're doing is achieving this, but we're not sure which bit of our work is doing that, and that?
So with specific projects, we can put measurements in, and we can say, say you've done an improvement, Home Lacey Road. We can say there's been an increase of people cycling on Home Lacey Road because we have monitors there to do it. There will be then the overall ones that look at movement throughout the whole city or the market towns. That probably wouldn't be able to split down into individual. So I think there'll be a mixture of both. There'll be an overarching improvement. And then if we're monitoring individual projects, we should have pre and post scheme monitoring, and we should be able to show how individual schemes are improving, but also we probably can't split everything down, unfortunately.
Okay. Yes.
Just a quick question on exit. Would it be a similar scheme to that they've got at Waitrose in the city? So they've got cameras on the way in, barriers on the way out.
We won't necessarily put barriers on our car parks. You don't have to. So the ANPR camera that looks at the number plate, that will then link to a machine. So you can put barriers on. It's not a requirement. I parked in car parks have both, and there's just signs very clear on there going, remember to pay on exit.
What if they don't?
You'll get a letter to the post.
Oh, I see.
Advise the number they're not paying to park.
So the number plate will be recorded.
Yes.
I see.
Yeah. So then I think what I've had is I parked in Southside London. I logged on to, they had just parked. I logged on, put my number plate in and it said, this is your current outstanding amount. So I paid to carve where I was, it knew where I was and what the payment was. And then I did it, and that's fine. So you can use the app to support you. But I was or you can use the machine when there. So it should allow people of all different needs to meet that. I think speaking to the people running Waitrose, they say the barriers are very difficult because people think you pay at the barrier. So it causes a lot of queues. So there's a negative and a positive of having a barrier. Positive, they can't leave without paying, so they don't get a letter to the post. But negatively, it impacts the queues because people aren't 100% sure what it means to pay on exit. It means pay when you leave, not pay at the barrier. That's also barriers quite expensive to maintain. And also, I don't want to stop people getting out of the car park if the barrier is shut and there's somebody stuck in, they can't get out because we haven't fixed it. So that part of the trial is how we're going to kind of support that transition.
One thing we haven't touched on is EV infrastructure. Just want to touch on that briefly. How is it strategically aligned? Are you aligning the expansion with forecast demand or with grid capacity?
We have been working alongside the team, Richard Bourne's team, who are working on the levy, the LEVA grant that we've got. At the moment, we're working with them, and they're based it on a number of factors, and that is demand and capacity. One thing that we are looking at doing is for some of the parking outside, say, new developments, we're looking at redesigning our design guide to make sure that new developments, whether they're retail, residential, business, have appropriate EV charging that is necessarily within our control. Within our control, the team are looking at implementing a certain level.
When you say within our control, what do you mean?
So like we can implement EV parking on our own highway and in our own car parks. We can't do that in, say, Tesco's, or we can't do that necessarily in new developments until they come under our control. What would be frustrating is if we adopt a load of new developments onto our highway access and there's not enough EV charging and we have to put it in for them. So we want to make sure it's in when these things are built. So if Tesco's come in or Aldi comes in, they know the minimum of EV charging ports that we would expect in their car park, and that will be part of their planning. So the strategy goes into planning.
So are you again coming with the strategy? Is it based on future demand?
Future demand.
Mainly,
Yeah.
and grid capacity, is that playing catch up?
So we are very good because we have a really great team and looking at where the grid capacity is. We know there is a grid capacity, and we're trying to look at alternative technologies such as solar charged EV.
When you say you know there's a grid capacity issue, is what you're saying?
Well, yeah, I think if there was enough for everyone, that'd be great. But so we're looking at alternative ways of providing EV that's not solely reliant on the grid. Once the solar runs really good, they get better. So we're looking at providing those in our car box that don't necessarily require the grid to capture the demand.
Okay. Do you have any more questions on the policy? Just like I say, thank you again for bringing this to scrutiny. It's real value. What we're going to do now is we're going to take, I'm going to ask the recording to be suspended, and we're going to take 5 minutes to shape some recommendations. I'm afraid I have to ask members of the public and press just to leave the room just for 5 minutes while we shape these, because we're now no longer in session. And then one of us will come out and let you know as soon as we start on the next side, if that's okay. So thank you for bearing with us. I'm afraid that, Gabby, yes, sorry, mate. And I think, are you saying for the Wi-Fi? I think councillors can, say actually, but if you wish to go and have a thumper break, you can. Yeah. The committee will talk about this. So I want to take.
Is it recorded?
Putting a stop. Bad stop. Okay, thank you very much for bearing with us there. We now, hopefully on the screen, we've come up with a number of recommendations that will be coming forward from this committee. Would you like to read those?
Thank you, Chair. For the record, I'm Daniel Webb, the Scrutiny Officer, and here are the recommendations suggested by the next committee's Scrutiny Committee. parking strategy. There are 5 recommendations and they are as follows. 1, include a section explaining why Herefordshire Council charges parking. 2, engage specifically with enforcement officers as part of the strategy development. 3, engage as soon as possible with town and parish councils to help shape the local approach. 4, provide evidence of the modal shift arising from the strategy. 5, ensure the strategy makes clear that the option to pay for parking using cash will remain for all council provided parking.
Very much.
Maybe add a little bit to that last one to say parking using cash will remain as will paying by card or by an app.
I think the fact that it says it's an option, it's implicit in that. I think it's implicit. Thank you for that, but I don't think it needs clarity. I think it's implicit within the statement itself. I'm happy to propose. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Toynbee, all those in favour? Thank you very much. Those will go forward. Okay, we're now moving on to section 8 on the agenda, which is the Hereford bypass phase 1. I'm going to ask Scott Tompkins, Delivery Director, to give an introduction in a second. I'm just going to, before we do that, just do a quick statement, which is to say that today's focus is on the assessment criteria that we use to assess the full business case for phase 1 of the Western bypass. Our role as a committee here is to consider whether it is robust, transparent, and capable of supporting a sound decision by Cabinet. We're not here to debate the merits of the bypass itself, the route, or whether the scheme should proceed. Those are matters for later when the full business case is brought forward. Today is about whether the process for assessing that case is fit for purpose. In particular, we should be asking whether the assessment criteria is clear and consistent, allows for proper evaluation of outcomes, not just confirmation that requirements are met, and gives Cabinet sufficient visibility of evidence, risks, and value for money to make an informed judgment. I'm going to ask members to keep their contributions focused on those points. If discussion begins to move into wider merits of the scheme, I'll bring us back to the assessment criteria. Our aim is to provide constructive feedback on whether the criteria will give Cabinet the assurance it needs, or whether it will benefit from refinement before being applied. I'm now going to ask Scott to do the introduction, please.
Chair. So Scott Tompkins, I'm the Infrastructure Delivery Director. Those of you that haven't met me before, I wanted to start out by sort of setting the scene for why we're coming to students today. Thank you for taking this, having the opportunity to feed into this. If you will recall, when Council made the decision to allocate capital funding for the construction of phase 1, there was a number of concerns raised at that council meeting about the lack of evidence to show that the scheme was value for money, and that the council would be borrowing money, investing its own money into the scheme, that there wasn't evidence to show that the scheme was value for money. And so Cabinet agreed that before they would proceed to construction of the scheme, before they would, so essentially the capital money is allocated, but it's not released to officers to spend against that allocation until a full business case was published and had been reviewed, and the decision by Cabinet would be made. So the decision in July that Cabinet will make will be to decide if the scheme should go forward into the construction phase. At that point, the preferred contractor, which has been named as Grant Construction, would then be confirmed and awarded the construction. So the thought is that actually the full business case is quite a big document. If we look back at the full business case that was being prepared back in 2019, never published because the scheme was stalled. But the full business case then was something over 500-600 pages in length. So it is a weighty document to be looked at. And we thought actually that it would put an awful lot of pressure on both Cabinet and on members to just have all that land in one decision. So we felt it was better to try to break the decision down into let's look now at the assessment criteria for how that full business case would be looked at. We did this, we got some directors in the room, and we had a conversation about, okay, what does cabinet need to know for agreeing to move on to that next stage, to move on to that construction stage. So you will see in the draft assessment criteria that it's not just about assessment, it's also about requirements. So there are some things that need to be in place, like ownership of land, like confirmation of budget, confirmation from DFT about spend. You know, there's certain things that are requirements that would need to be in the criteria. And then there are other things which are what I would call assessment criteria, which is it value for money? Is it good to spend against public purse? Having met the is there enough mitigation, or is there how we address the right environmental, those sorts of things. So we drafted some criteria. To try to organize that. We listed it into 5 themes. So I've listed those as technical, planning, environmental, commercial, and financial, to group the criteria together. We try to put a few under each. Very much draft, very much looking for your input on how we amend those, or some of them you'll look at and think, well, that's already been met. So some of them are quite straightforward. Others are very stretching and challenging. So we just welcome your feedback on them. So very happy to go through them as we want to just take questions.
Thank you, Scott. Councillor Pricey, do you want to say anything at this stage?
No, I'm quite happy you mentioned the fact that you March was that it's the 2-stage scrutiny that when we look at it, and the real crunch will be when you've got the whole business case in front of you. And this is trying to be lining it so that you understand what will be in this case when you look at that.
Absolutely. And while you're touching it, what I would like to say is Scrutiny welcomes the opportunity to be invited to scrutinise this piece of work. And that is welcome and should be applauded and acknowledged, because that wasn't something that had to happen. So, wearing Scrutiny Chair's hat, it's great that you have this opportunity to look at it. So thank you for that. I'd also like to introduce, or ask Tom to introduce himself to the room. When we were asked to look at this piece of work, it was felt, and I spoke with both with Scott and with Daniel, and said that I felt this was such an important piece of work that we needed, as a committee, to have a critical friend and an independent voice who could advise us and give us some assurance and some technical backup that we were navigating this particular topic as well as we possibly could. So Tom, perhaps you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. As an ex-pantomime Dane, I hope I can project enough for everybody to hear. So I'm a Bradley resident, just in the borders of I'm also a chartered transport planning professional. I am, yes, a critical friend of expert knowledge. What gives me these credentials? I'm the digital transport at Amy. I'm also a visiting professor at the University of Leeds. But most importantly, perhaps, is I advise the Department for Transport on strategic modelling and appraisal. Been doing that since 2015. So I'm well aware of the Green Book, the role of the Green Book in decision making, and how that is implemented by the Department for Transport in its own procedures, such as better business cases and TAP, their transport appraisal guide. So what I hope to contribute today, and I'm open as your critical friend to you, is to help you identify assessment criteria that align with best practice as set out in the Green Book, and identify criteria. I think that will help cabinet look across all the information that will be in the files in the full business case, so that they can use as much information that's being produced to come to an informed and robust and defensible decision.
Thank you for that. That was very helpful. I'm afraid there is no opportunity to take questions at this stage in the meeting.
We don't know what his name is.
Sorry, Tom Van Buren.
Sorry?
Can you see this?
No.
Tom Van Buren.
VANVUREN.
Tom Van Buren. No problem at all.
Well,
Right, okay. I'll kick off with a couple of questions, if that's all right, and then we will open it up to the committee. So to Scott initially, looking at the assessment criteria overall, can you explain how how it enables Cabinet to distinguish between a strong business case and more marginal one, rather than simply confirming that minimum requirements have been met?
So I think one of the key criteria assessment is value for money criteria. So the benefits to cost ratio will be one of the criteria that's looked at. And the BCR, DFT tends to grade BCRs as low, medium, or high. So a BCR over 1.5 is considered medium, 3 is considered high. And I think our recommendation to Cabinet would be that we want at least a medium value scheme. So any BCR over 1 is determined at a value, but it tends to be that 1.5 level is where you see a reasonable value for a scheme.
I mean, I think this something that came out was it felt as if the VFM, the value for money, is the key mechanism for determining whether the scheme should proceed. That seems to be something we discussed at meetings before this. Scott, can you set out how the assessment criteria will ensure that the VFM case is presented in a way that's robust, transparent, and fully understood by Cabinet?
So just go back on that slide there. I would say that is the whole of the assessment criteria, not just the VFM, I think, because there are, you look at that assessment criteria, there are things like does that document set out very clearly the strategic fit of the scheme with all of our policies? So there are a number of other things in there that, the environmental issues, does the scheme demonstrate that consider the environmental issues that we put forward, robust mitigation for environmental issues. So I think that Cabinet should be looking at it as a whole package. Some of the things we put in there are quite challenging. We may not be able to meet all of those things, but I think Cabinet will have to decide as a whole package if the assessment is robust and can be forward. On the value for money question, I think what that full business case will give you is a clear result that shows that we've done professional consultant has done all the modeling work correctly. There's a modeling validation report in there that demonstrates what's included in the model and that the model's been checked. All of that will be signed off by those consultants. That will produce the model data is then put into the assessments, the TUBA and the tagged assessments that are done for Green Book. So the figure that's coming out at the end of it is a Green Book compliant benefits cost ratio number. So Cabinet should have confidence that that is a number that they can.
Okay. Coming to you, Councillor Price. I mean, from your perspective as a decision maker, do you think the criteria will give Cabinet sufficient clarity on the strength of the case, the risks and the trade-offs involved, or are there areas where you would like more detail to support that judgment?
No doubt about it. The way we've gone about this is open to transparency to make sure that where the clear decision will be made on the outcomes. I suspect that as we progress into the whole of the scheme, ECR would actually improve against just one. That was always the case. If we go back over the period of time, and interestingly, in my bag, which I haven't pulled out, I have a map of this very self-saving scheme from 1986. The Department of Transport scheme since then, before, almost on the same. But I can remember during the course of 2015, 16, 17, the debate about the environmental issues, about the whole bypass in the round, was there was a lot of movement of material. And if it was broken up into chunk by chunk by chunk, it was going to be rather more challenging to be able to make the movements. Because some of the earth, for instance, needed to be there from here, where that can't be there, because that's the next stage, you know, so there's all sorts of challenges there to consider, and, you know, the officers know this full well. And this is one of the things that, Councillor Graham's are looking at as to, doing the value engineering, how the thing can be, when you're doing it bit by bit. But to answer your question, I think that we will finish up with that will be satisfactory to meet the decision to go.
Is that all you want? You want, I mean, I'm just curious, I mean, one from the assessment criteria.
It's not from the assessment criteria, is they that we tick the box to say that we have satisfied the criteria. Why you're having this debate, the criteria correct for the full business case. That full business case, when it is presented, should be a straightforward, this is meeting everything. We will see when we get to that.
I think we'll probably come back to that in a second. Yes, Scott, do you want to come up?
Just say, go back to my previous comment about the looking at this holistically. So the reason that there's any other criteria on that list is because all of them have some importance to giving assurance to cabinet. So whether it's the ownership of the land or whether it's the confirmed budget from the PCSA process of going through charter, those are all things that if I was a cabinet member, I would want to see those things all ticked off. We have an answer, we have a satisfactory answer before we agree to move on to the construction phase. So all things that need to be in place to allow that construction phase to happen.
I hear that. Thank you. Let's open it up to the committee.
Thank you. But initial points made, it's always I go through more in one go.
I think so. If I feel that they might be,
Yeah.
we can I'll come back to you for a second bite of the cherry.
Yeah,
Okay.
you know, please, my friend, I don't know. If
No, that's fine.
But, okay, thanks. So, thanks very much. I reiterate how useful it is that it's come through. I'm really grateful. Thank you very much. This is really, really welcome. Especially, Hereford, this administration is asking the people of Herefordshire to pay for this road. So, it's very important. So, as has been said, we're going to be discussing the criteria a lot this afternoon, and I'm sure residents are keen that there is rigorous. The criteria is rigorous as if we were applying to central government for funding. They need to know that their money has been well spent. And they deserve reassurance that these documents are not just tick boxes, that assess how ready the project is, which it could be argued this rather looks like, but proper criteria that measure its benefits for local people and its value for money. Going back to your initial comments, Chair, that there has been a little bit of confusion over the fact that the item on the agenda is called methodology and the report is called assessment criteria. And obviously, there's more to methodology than assessment criteria. For example, modelling, as you mentioned. So, it's a shame that the people sort of wrote questions before that was clarified. So I'm sorry about that, and thank you for setting that straight. So when it's a criterion, not a criterion, paragraph 14 of the report tells us that the table in Appendix 1 has specific assessment criteria or requirements that are proposed to be evaluated again. But when we actually look at the table, we see what look more like assertions and procedural checks, not tools for evaluation. And I know I'm pedantic, but I think we have to be a bit pedantic about this. It looks as though there's a confusion between process and outcome, readiness and ripeness, what criteria are, and whether or not they've been met. And those two things naturally need to be separated. So just to take road safety as one example, when it has criterion, road safety should be that the proposed road, for example, will fulfil a certain requirement, not that the statement that it already does. Assertions that requirements have already been met are not criteria. So for road safety, the impact on road safety, according to this, is actually apparently negative. In other words, it won't improve road safety. So it would be good to know how much weight this is given in the business case. Can I go on?
Yeah, I mean, unless you want to get that point addressed first, or does this second point address relate to that specifically?
Yeah, I'm happy to have an answer to it on
Okay.
the time, yeah.
We'll take that. No, Scott.
Yeah, I think the road safety one reflects the reality of the scheme. So the reality of this road is that you're building a higher speed road to take traffic. You're reducing traffic on some residential areas, which will improve safety in the residential areas. But you're building a high speed road when you have accidents on high speed road, you get more serious incidents and fatalities. So I don't think it's fair to say that the scheme will ever entirely improve road safety. It will improve it in one area, but it will be lesser in another area. So I think what we're looking for is that overall it doesn't have a negative impact on safety. So you're right. We've looked at these criteria through the lens of what can the scheme deliver, what it can't deliver. It's not possible to set a criteria for which you know a bar that we never get over because of the nature of the scheme.
Oh, you
Can I jump in there? I think what you are asking for is for granularity in this criteria, the information that will be made available in terms of safety. So it's not just a number, and a number has to be positive, and then it's all okay. The safety calculations in the modelling consist of fatalities, serious injuries, and minor injuries. They all get weighted with a particular value per injury, and that leads to an overall component of the value for money analysis. What I hear you say is that's perhaps not enough information to make that decision on, and B, if that information is negative, in terms of value, for example, it's negative, but in terms of the number of accidents, actually the outcome is positive as far as I've seen in the report. So a refinement of this particular criteria in a way that really satisfies the information that government needs to make an informed decision.
So you're saying moving from pass fail to I think, as you said in your report, to the committee to graded assessments on this and a range of other areas is one potential.
That's one way in which to provide more information, but also to give more confidence that people understand that this is not just a number, there's underlying mechanisms for that number, including evaluation of each of these kinds of incidents and the way in which it's calculated. I mean, I haven't seen the modelling, but for example, what could be done is, as Scott says, we're modelling a 30-mile-an-hour road versus a 40-mile-an-hour road. A 40-mile-an-hour road in our models will inevitably lead to a higher risk of accidents. You could look at the accidents that are already taking place on the 30-mile-an-hour roads that are going to be relieved by new roads, and they could well be higher than the average that are in our calculations, our default calculations, in which case you could see a positive outcome compared to another way of calculating. Understanding what these numbers are and how they have been derived, I hope will help the Cabinet understand how important slightly negative value of safety is in their decision making. I hope that makes sense.
More information.
More
granular information.
And if I go back to the full business case, is, as you say, it's big document. And I think these criteria would, if these criteria have been agreed, as it were, in this meeting, this will help consultants to provide in the full business case that information in a way that gives insights into the positives and the negatives and the distribution over residents versus non-residents or trade versus personal travel. So that granularity can be dragged out of the modelling, particularly the value for money elements of it.
And it wouldn't be unusual to see that in the criteria for this. That's correct. I'm going to come back to Diana because I promised you could continue asking your questions.
Okay, and thank you for the answer. Yes, on social value, which is a council policy, the only reference I can see to social value is on page 8, where it states that the contractor has provided the deliverable plan, time actions, and with local organisations supported. The fact that the contractor has provided something is not a criterion, that's a sort of paperwork check. So it's disappointing to see here that social value is treated purely in terms of contractor activity and not the benefits to our local communities. So I would like to see more weight given to social value. The very first line of the table cites demonstrable community benefit as a criterion, but these are not further defined. And if we're looking at community benefits, we should also, I would assume, we should be looking at community disbenefits. Well,
Scott, you want to?
Appreciate that's where I'm summarizing something and actually what they're deciding and having more granularity would be really useful. So the contractor has provided in their tender a quite lengthy document which sets out all their commitments to social value. So the number of graduates they're going to employ, the number of sessions they're going to do in schools on local use of local subcontractors. All those things are in that social value contract that's part of their tender. And maybe what we need to do is exercise that. So pull some of that out, demonstrated in the assessment criteria, so you can see.
I think that's part of the story. Forgive me. I think what the construction company does is part of it, but the actual social benefit of the SLR itself,
yeah.
I think needs some consideration as well. So there's two areas there. Both are relevant. It's great that you pulled one out there that immediately springs to mind, but actually the physical infrastructure, what's the social benefit of that as well? It's because or as Councillor Tomby says, what's the negative impact if that's something that comes to light?
Yes, thank you. I don't want to dominate. I've got 3 more things and then
We'll open up to the rest of the committee and you can come to you if that's okay. Yep. Sorry. Thank you. Have his hand up first, and I can see you. So
Sorry. Diana took some of my questions.
okay.
So I was interested in the benefit of this scheme to the residents of Herefordshire, visitors to the city. It just this the sudden leap round on its own. When you think about it, it's part of a larger scheme for the future. You can make go for it or against it, depending on you have wording when it comes to it. Can I relate this to the M25? 25 some stage. Back in the 70s, early 70s, I was part of a roads policing team there that looked at these, and it was built in parts, you probably know, much like Western Bypass is going to be. And when there were little bits of it, people were saying, oh, this is a waste of time, no one's going to use it. So it went on, it's going to cost too much money, and I don't. And there was all sorts of negative comments. Eventually, as you all know, it all joined up together. And suddenly people said, how on earth did we cope without it? And I think the same will apply to this Western Bypass. And I don't like the main Western Bypass. I describe it as diverting the A49 away from the city.
Let's stay on the assessment criteria if we can.
But well, that's right. This report here in front of us is asking a lot of us as lay to come up with reasons why we should support this.
Which is why Tom's here today to help us.
That's right. I read Tom's report this morning. Very interesting, but that depending on your point of view, I think the way Tom wrote some of it, you take it one way, yeah.
That's the point.
It was a bit of a French city thing.
Well, okay. Councillor Heathfield.
Picking up on what you said about how some of these criteria might not be achieved, I've noticed that some of them are absolute bare minimum requirements. Planning permission achieved, I really hope so. And things like the Natural England approval, so just absolute, meeting the statutory requirements and regulations. So I'd really love to see what are absolute requirements really clearly identified, and then recognising that other things that are hoped for, to what extent can the criteria give some understanding of how good we want it to be? How good does the journey time improvement need to be? At the moment, currently the modelling is showing 0.2 miles per hour improvement. So, is that enough? And I suppose just generally, just making sure that this criteria matrix aligns with the DfT transport business case. I'm not sure that it fully does yet. And just making sure that we've got that transport analysis guidance, especially on the development and the evidence needed for the economic appraisal side of it. And I suppose amongst all of that, I'm just really interested, especially in this world that we're currently in, with war in Iran and the impact it's having, especially on fuel costs, but increasingly on construction materials, is what's the sensitivity of all of these criteria? I feel that we're going to need numbers, but then error bars either side of them, especially on that construction cost, but also on those journey times. I'm just really noticing the number of assumptions building up on top of each other, and we'd really like to see a lot of these numbers having quite a lot of sensitivity analysis and error bars either side of them.
Come up on this one.
Yeah, so I think you're on your first point. Yeah, I absolutely agree. There are some things here which is the minimum standard, but I think the reason we've included them is that some of those things are still very difficult to achieve. So getting Natural England's approval and necessarily have that in place before we move to the construction phase. But there's an awful lot of work that goes in behind. There's ecology surveys going on now, and they were going on last year, and all of that data and information that sits there. So it's not whilst it seems like a minimum standard, I think it's important to recognise that we've done that because it's a lot of work that goes into it. I think it's one of those things that cabinet needs to make sure they've got that assurance that those things are met before they authorize construction. You wouldn't want to start a construction project on the ground when you don't have some of those approvals. Like planning permissions, it's not just the main planning permission, it's also the temporary works planning, supplementary applications that have to be met. All those have to be in process and be approved. I agree with you. I think on some of the assessment criteria, we're going to need to have some needs. All of this is a point in time decision. So between now and May, we have a construction tender price. We're working with the contractor very closely at the moment to look at what value engineering options we have, what can be taken forward, and when we will arrive at a price sometime in May, which will be used to do the assessment within the full business case. But like you said, there are things that will affect that, that will go beyond that. So having a range, I think is quite, and the same way that the PCR will probably be a range of values depending on with prices and things.
Very useful. Thank you. Do you want to come back in?
Yeah. Well, we're here because of the Black Day of the 2nd of February 2021. And let's not forget that. My experience of road building in Hereford, of course, Progress Access Road, and there's some similarities here because, of course, it was a section of highway rather than a part of a long line scheme. And therefore, it was always more difficult to make the case when you're looking at a section rather than the others. I think the issue I have here, and I think the issue that the population of Herefordshire has, is that we have huge infrastructure issues in Herefordshire. We have a government that's insisting that we increase our residents in the next 20 years by over a third. That's huge. that causes huge pressure on our road systems, on our energy and grid capacity, on our medical and hospital pressures, as well as educational and other aspects as well. And the problem is that you've got this piece of the highway on its own, which sometimes cannot always reflect its significance in part of that overall project in particular. And I know in particular with Rhombus, one of the great advantages that came out of it, of course, was the creation of employment, which was quite enormous. You know, it's been over 1,000 jobs created there. And the impact, the social impact that that's had on South Wye, one of our most, sensitive areas, the jobs that are created. If you can create employment, if you can get business growth to employ local people, that's what we've got to be about. And that's clearly what we've got to be about, because we're in a very competitive world, everybody else is doing it. So I see the issue here is that you've got a sectional highway which has to sort of stand alone and tick its criteria boxes, but it's very much part of a wider project, which will be absolutely essential to taking this county forward. Having said that, I mean, really my question is to our independent advisor. I mean, looking at this criteria, is there anything that gives you concern that you think has not been at this stage as it goes forward to Cabinet? And of course, its full case will come back to us.
Good question. I can take a quick step back if I may. So I think we've been talking about these criteria, discussing the whole reason right here. And I think that what would be a good set of criteria to enable Cabinet to make an informed decision is one, the ones that need to be in place, the yes, no's kind of things that are in there, like planning permission or what was it, approvals by natural language. Then we talked about the next step, which is sort of value for money as per the Green Book, which comes an awful lot of stuff. I think I've got about 15 elements that I have picked out of the Green Book on that, or actually this is from the value for money framework of the Department for Transport: journey time savings, liability, vehicle operating costs, accidents, but also wider economic benefits, which are actually being developed at the moment, as far as I can see, by consultants as a component of the value for money analysis. Now, value for money is not just the monetized impacts. What we can monetize, we will monetize, and that makes it easy to come up with a BCR, but it also makes it easy to compare its benefits on the one hand and benefits on the other hand of things that are difficult to compare, vehicle operating costs versus, let's say, journey time savings. So I think the value for money element of what the criteria need to cover, can be in ranges, can be distributed, can give us more granular information rather than the pass fail perhaps that at the moment it shows. And that can be extracted from much of the modelling that is done. I mean, the modelling and the appraisal are actually very much tied together in that respect. So I think the wider economic impacts could be pulled out as an element of the value for money, particularly if you think that it's an important criteria to be visible and challengeable. It's hard to model, I admit that. And then there's the third element, which is other information that I think Cabinet members may want to have, which is not in the value for money framework at all, but is considered important by them or their residents or in general. I haven't found any here at the moment that I sort of see that would fall under that. But to some extent, this is driven by what Cabinet members think is important for them. So I think it can all. I think what you are asking for can be achieved in terms of providing information. What is this link? Yeah, this link road going to achieve in terms of particularly employment? If that's important, can be pulled out by the consultant in the information that they provide, therefore that Cabinet members can take into consideration. Does that help?
I think it's one thing we touched on that I think Councillor Heathfield mentioned, which was, and I think we touched on, was in your report, was risk.
Yes.
And I think that answers Councillor Phillips' question as well. And I do think there could be clearer reporting of risk, assumptions and uncertainty, which covers your reference to Iran, to increase prices and everything like that. So I think incorporating something in the FBC, if we were to request that, would be, do you want to just explain that?
Yeah, well, the risk, if I think some of you will have seen this, the draft report that AECOM has produced, and it picks up at the moment two elements of risks, and they are standard elements that we would normally review. One is the risk in the cost, by looking at either optimism bias, or I think what they've done in their report is look at the kind of values in which construction costs would need to change to shift the value for money category, shifting values as we call them. So basically, how much space have we got in the costs of the construction to turn a project from delivering medium value for money to low value for money, or indeed high value for money? And that is a way in which to address construction risk. We have to rely, I guess, on the estimators to identify what a reasonable range is there. And the other risk that in the report is being addressed is the demand for transport, three scenarios of a poor economic growth, a high economic growth, and a low economic growth that affects many things in the modelling, including fuel prices, but also values of time, which will then go into the valuation of journey time savings. And I think the report shows a range of how the benefits will change if you change those assumptions. I don't know if there's time in this process to sort of say what other scenarios would government need to see. There are 6 common analytical scenarios that the department has produced, which consultants can use as an agreed way through it. Uncertainty, one of them, for example, is a behavioural change scenario where we don't see an increase in car use, for example, where autonomous vehicles come in and other sort of technological developments start affecting the amount of travel that we do. But the core, medium and high growth are standard scenarios that a consultancy will use to bring in the risk of the benefits that get derived from schemes such as these.
And you'd recommend that that's incorporated into some form of, when we're looking at the risk assessment?
Absolutely. It should, I think, be in the financial. You've got a value for money, BCR. I think the last value, the last one was satisfied that calculated benefit to cost ratio represents value for money. Having achieved in this case with even more high assessment score. Okay, that can be broadened to a criteria that says maybe not even that, or the criteria needs to show the distribution of these benefits under different future scenarios. That would not be a yes, no, that would be information that cabinet members can take into account to judge how much risk they think there is in, for example, low growth or high growth occurring and the impact that it will have.
So you think we should ensure that the BCR incorporates high, medium, low growth risk scenarios?
Well, it will anyway.
It will anyway.
I know that the presentation of information.
So the presentation is the assessment of each cabinet. Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Councillor Phillips?
Yeah, sorry, something that's part of this observation is the trouble is we're Herefordshire. We're not part of the southeast or the wonderful powerhouse of the north. And so statistically, we're never going to throw out those big numbers that the urban areas will do. And I mean, I'm conscious with the Romulus Access Road that we struggled to reach transports, tick boxes. It was the economic case that pushed it through, and it was because it was divorced from government and regional development agency we got it. Thank God we did. I don't think there's anybody in the room that didn't want that. But I know my residents, they look at things like the Newtown bypass. I mean, God knows where the business case for that came from, and that's from which on why. Well, I mean, if that's the sound business case, I'm going to the moon tomorrow. And my worry always is, particularly as they tighten criteria, and is absolutely weighted against anything that isn't in east or north.
I come across that all the time in my discussions with Demand for Transport. With the demand, I don't think that's a really for you an issue. I think the fact that what I've seen in terms of the value for money calculations, bringing this project in at a medium value for money category should not cause you any concerns in terms of that is not as to meet expectations in terms of how government, in this case, local government, should spend its money. And I like to give an example of the Lower Thames crossing, and we can all have our sort of views on whether you should do a Lower Thames crossing. The Lower Thames crossing hasn't got a better value for money achievement, and spades are in the ground as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. And I think the Secretary of State has decided that the strategic case is strong enough, irrespective of the value for money component of the decision-making process. And that's right. I mean, again, going to the Green Book, first of all says the scheme needs to align with the relevant strategies that exist. And then secondly, needs to then maximise the value for money. And the value for money is not just the BCR, it's the BCR in terms of covering the things that we can monetize.
Yeah.
It's then other things that we can quantify but not monetize. And then it's other things that we can't even quantify. They all need to be brought into the overall decision-making process of whether the decision makers feel that this is the right way of solving a problem and spending money. So I think the value for money is an important element. But again, the Green Book has made it very clear we want to get away from people thinking that ECR is the be all and end all. It's about giving information, evidence to the decision maker so they can make an informed decision that centers around a number of things that we can calculate and things that are considered locally important. So
The assessment criteria we're talking about today.
absolutely, absolutely.
I'm making me sure thing.
Yes, Councillor Todd.
Can I-
Yes, you carry on.
Yeah, that was really useful.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
value for money, because, you know, I'm interested in how Tom worded a sort of example criteria, which was something like business case must show that, which to my mind, that's a criteria. This must show that rather than we've ticked this box. And it's in the table, we've got section 151 private calculated BCR represent value for money. And if so, fine. But once again, you know, that is a judgment. It's not an assessment criterion. So it's very interesting what you're saying about scenarios and risk. And as you also said, that this is about political decisions at the end of the day, which is fine. That's democracy.
Yeah.
So just following on from that, what we all want is for the cabinet to make the best possible decision. So we need the most effective possible frameworks to help them so that we know they're making the right decisions for Herefordshire. So I suppose my question is about sort of best practices from other places, you know, the schemes from other places, schemes that meant schemes that didn't go ahead, why didn't they? You know, are these frameworks, I should know this, but are these frameworks standard templates, you know, are they the same as what we'd be doing if it was a national road scheme, or, you know, would we be looking at different criteria if it was a national scheme, or do we not have to because we're getting the people to pay for this instead? It would be interesting to see how this compares with comparable schemes from other parts of the country so that we can be assured that our systems are robust. And just one final thing, just is on carbon. These assessment criteria only refer to carbon toxic emissions in relation to construction and not operational emissions. And that's an omission to me, because carbon is naturally a transport issue, not just a construction issue. So given that this council has declared a climate and biodiversity emergency, it would be good to have a bit more meaningful environmental impact assessments at this stage and not throw it all to the forward. Thank you.
That's got.
Address the first bit first, about the business case and where it's spent is, it's fine. We are doing a green book compliant full business case. So the reason we're doing that is that we want this to be acceptable by the Department for Transport, by government, so that if there's any opportunity in the future for government grant funding to be used for us to release funding from the, not so that we don't have to borrow funding, but that's what we want to be in place. So we are asking the government to consider this a retained scheme, and because of that, we need to make sure that we are fully compliant. So business case that's being done is a full green book business case and we'll need to get those standards. So Councillor Toynbee, your question, if your scheme is the national scheme, how would it be judged? This is exactly how it would be judged. Just to say that the strategic outline business case is originally done on the South Transport Package back in between 2014 and 2018. That original strategic outline was a green book business case. Compliance schemes within that package was to everyone's being delivered or have been delivered, and the SLR that was part of that is what we're delivering now in phase one. So phase one, but this full business case is just assessing phase one on its own standalone. We're not looking at any of the other measures. We're not looking at its reliance on phase two. It is very much just so that the value for money assessment that's being done is looking at the cost of building it and looking at the impact of building it on the times, etc. Look into that calculation. The only place where anything wider is considered is the fact that it is about the strategic fit. And that is a decision that was made previously by this council when it decided when Cabinet approved the road strategy, and Council approved the local transport plan, which both have the bypass, the whole route bypass has in its core element, with phase one being the anchor point for that. So whilst when you read the full business case, it talks about the full bypass, the assessment, please be assured the assessment that's being done is on the scheme standalone. It comes to your question, Councillor Toynbee, about carbon. When I was writing these criteria, I was very much thinking about the construction, because that's the phase we're into. We're not thinking about is the scheme a good scheme to do or not, because the decision that has to be made is that we're going to be ready to go to the construction phase. We're not asking the Cabinet, is this a good scheme or not, because that was already decided, which is why it was in it's published in strategy and policy documents of the council. So, but however, I'm quite happy to look at a few recommendations that we want to look at some of the carbon impacts of the full scheme on Herod. Happy to do that as well. Don't know if any of those in the assessment at the moment, certainly ask the consultant to also this out.
Thank you. You left.
Didn't know what to say. So I'm just writing it down.
Okay. Thanks for calling through.
I think Scott knew what I was going to ask, because I think you more or less answered the question that I got, which was if this phase one was a standalone bypass with no thoughts that we were going to do anything else, were the criteria that we're looking at today, would they be exactly the same? I think for some of us, we always thought it's phase one of, and therefore we need phase one before we can go to phase two. But I think the way you explained it, and correct me if I'm wrong, was that this is purely looking at phase one as if there is never a phase two. Although we hope there is.
I don't think any of the criteria that we've listed have anything to do with phase two. That's they are all about the assessment of phase one.
Again, correct me if I'm wrong, but
the only thing
the FBC has to be just for phase one, doesn't it?
That's
Yes. Yeah.
The only criterion that might cross over there is the one where it talks about strategic fit, because it's strategic fit. It talks about our policies and national policy and the new road strategy and a lot of transport plan for long-term strategy there, which advocates the whole bypass.
And that was exactly the same with Lawrence. It had to stand on its own feet. And as I said earlier, it failed to take the transport policy, but it was the economic case that brought it home and the circumstances of the region without it. Thank God we did.
It was a strategic case, as you say, absolutely political decision.
Let's go remain.
Councillor Heathfield.
I want to get being pedantic. I just wanted to mention one particular word, woodland mitigation. So because we're talking about ancient woodland, that is completely irreplaceable. We can't use the word mitigation, but all we can attempt is compensation. And so I would really like that to be updated. And overall, that brings me to the environmental baseline we're considering. Obviously, we're relying completely on the SEA as the LTP here, and that didn't cover appraisal of policies within it. So I'm really concerned that we've not got the full environmental baseline here, especially it just makes me think about the River White SAC. There's no reference here to it's failing, but there will be an impact. I just wanted to make that point and see if there's in ways in which you can take that.
Yeah, very happy to, you're right, there's no replacement ancient woodland. The area of ancient woodland that we're crossing through is approximately 2 acres of ancient woodland. We currently in what is like 6 acres. So the impact will be 2 acres. We are intending to plant additional 13 acres. Both all are connected to that woodland. As compensation, there's no mitigation. In addition to that, there is substantial hedgerow with it. That is very much on our minds. But I will make that correction.
Councillor Tommy, did you want to come in for clarification?
Not just, maybe in a minute.
Okay. Any other committee members have questions at this stage? Councillor Tommy, before we wrap things up, do you want to come in on?
Well, what's really interesting what you said, talked about that we're not asking if this is a good scheme or not. Because I thought that the point of assessment criteria were assessing to what extent it is a good scheme.
It's one way of wording that. I guess what I'm saying is that as an officer, I've been given the task of the scheme, which the council has in its strategy has decided it wants to deliver. I have the job of producing an assessment, non-bias, that says, okay, you want to deliver this, putting all the information we have available into the pot. This is what the assessment comes out and tells us. That has to be an honest and transparent assessment. And the criteria in which we're looking here is to judge that assessment, right? And particularly the points that were raised by members at council meeting. The capital money was approved, which is the scheme value for money, which is what we're trying to do by reducing this case. So I guess it's that fine line between the fact that the administration and this council has put it into its policy that bypasses its desire, compared to
this bit of the bypass that we're about to deliver, does it demonstrate life?
Yeah, so that's quite tricky for you, isn't it? I just wonder if Tom's got anything to say about that, doing things that way round and is your comment.
Is that usual, Tom?
Well, the point of better business case, you go through the strategic outline, and the full, you don't really go back to what you agreed earlier on. Apart from that, if it turns out that the value for money is very poor, the case is made, and the next stage looks at how do you implement that scheme in a way that delivers value for money. And yeah, agreement will always be very much about value for money. I think that doesn't mean, I think that providing information to government around, if it's particularly around things like carbon, of the carbon impacts of using when the new road is in place, it's a bad thing. But this information that helps understand what this road is going to do in all its dimensions, whether it's about creating job opportunities, whether it's about reducing accidents in Walnut Avenue, whether it's about opening up a space for other ways in which the space on the roads now being relieved can be used. And sorry, as I'm from the north of the county or the northwest of the county, I'm not quite sure where I've done one road and so on and so forth. It's quite surprising. I make it to the station usually at Morrison's. So I think that in terms of criteria, this is and this is again what the agreement really wants. It's about narrative. It's understanding. It's not just numbers. It's the narrative. How did we get to these numbers, and what do these numbers mean? So I would say anything that you worry about that doesn't give you enough understanding, where you worry about that the cabinet will not have an understanding of all the impacts of the road, irrespective of what they. I don't think, without even going back whether it's a good road or not, I don't think that will be helpful and will be aligned with what I think the agreements expect you to do.
Hear that? So there's no harm in having that information. So there's an holistic approach to the decision making.
And I would have thought that carbon fits into the value for money calculations that the consultants are carrying out anyway on the basis of the model. I was trying to find it, I can't.
Does that answer your question? Good.
Yeah, interesting. The more information, better.
Okay. I feel, and I feel like we're reaching a point where we can make our deliberations, unless anybody has any burning questions. Yes, yes.
Thank you, Chair. I think we touched on this a bit about the different objectives in the local transport plan. Sort of competing trade-offs there. I just wanted to, I guess, just ask a bit more clarity on that. Just how will the criteria, the framework for this help cabinet members to understand and navigate those trade-offs between sort of different elements of the RTP? Okay. Is that a thing that it can do? Should do.
Yeah, I think we included those 4 key areas of the LTP strategy to try and demonstrate that we're trying to link what we're assessing to that strategy. You're right. Sometimes there will be things in it that are competing. So and it's an objective consideration. So when I did that, that's my opinion of those strategy elements. Does it link to that assessment? I might argue that one doesn't or doesn't. So, but yeah, I think it helps cabinet to see that we're not straying away from, we're not bringing in something that isn't linked to what's already in strategy.
I think we touched on this when we talked to Tom, and one of the things he said about trade-offs is that they can be more explicit if the success criteria have more granular data. Do you want to explain that, just because we touched on it briefly, and I do think it's one of the recommendations that's possibly going to come out today.
Yeah, I'll try. So basically, I always a lot with economists, and I don't always understand what they're saying and always agree with what they're saying. But one of the things that they're very keen on, that is in the Green Book, in the end it's written by Treasury anyway, is that we try to trade off the pros, the pros and the cons, the winners and the losers, and we try to give money values to them so we can actually end up overall with whether, even though there are winners and losers, and even though there might be pros and cons in terms of carbon versus journey times versus accident, we end up with a number that tells us, hey, actually, this is good value for money in terms of spending the taxpayers' money. And that doesn't mean that what goes underneath that final number is not important. I think it's very important. So, going back to your question about the LTP will have inevitably, I think, elements in it that will compete with each other. I know, economic growth versus economic sustainability versus environmental sustainability. So I think it's about developing success criteria or assessment criteria that show this distribution over the benefits and disbenefits, and not just get carried away with this number. And this, I think, what Scott tried to, and maybe it's not the end of the line, to align the criteria as they stand now with the four key elements of the LTP, isn't it, in terms of the objectives of the LTP. So that in the end, in the way in which the information will be presented, hopefully, people can see that A, much of this aligns with the LTP, it doesn't come out of nowhere, but B, how it better aligns with some of the strategies than with others.
More information, so we know what's going on under the bonnet.
And not all of it has to be quantified. And not all of it has to be monetized according to the grid.
Yeah.
Although not quantifying information makes it very hard to.
Not all of it can be quantified, can it? So, thank you. Any more questions? What I'm going to suggest we do is, once again, we take 10 minutes to just 10 minutes. We won't take a couple of break, but just about 10 minutes to go through our recommendations. I'm going to ask members of the public again if you could leave the room, please. That's a hill directly. We'll start again at 25 to 5. Please stop the recording, please. I'd be very. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. I'd now like to ask the officer if he will read out the community's issues on Hereford bypass phase 1.
Thank you, Chair. Will do. There are 4 recommendations, and they're as follows. 1, move from past failed assessments to scored or graded assessments to ensure more granularity in traffic outcomes, safety outcomes, land acquisition, carbon reduction, woodland mitigation, biodiversity net gain, construction price, social value, affordability, value for money. 2, widen the criteria for measuring social value to include the distribution of impacts on people in Herefordshire. 3, ensure clearer reporting of project risk, assumptions and uncertainty. 4, ensure the report to Cabinet incorporates high, medium, low growth risk scenarios.
Very much. Do I have a proposer for these? Councillor Phillips, seconder. Councillor Cornthwaite, all those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Right, moving on to 9 work programme 26-27. Over to you, Daniel. Thank you. Nice, thank you, folks. Thank you. Still on there, the next meeting. We have a busy work programme. Just to remind people what we've got coming up, really, both committee members and viewers at home.
As we've taken on this piece of work, short notice. We've done a bit of juggling around, which hasn't actually, that's kind of worked in our favour anyway. It cuts a bit of extra time on the broadband. So I'm trying to give to us actually. There's quite a bit of public input. Sort of thought some of that's in. Yes. At the moment, we have a meeting planned for 2022. Because of this extra road. So on the 23rd of June. Pardon?
We get better.
Yes, you do. Well,
No, for the record. No, we don't.
So proposals at the moment, 23rd of June, then we will look at full business case bypass, and we will also look at broadband connectivity. So strong copy for that one. It's going to be a long one, I suspect. Then on the 7th of July, we'll be looking at capital projects and euro delivery. The plan is to do a mid-year review of capital projects taking place this year. This is one to go to election. I think we want to make sure that things are on track. And then also we'll be bringing to you a draft of the task and finish group, public participation in planning task and finish group, which we've been working on. So just going to be working on behalf of the committee, and I'll be reporting that back on the 7th of July. At the moment, we have no meetings planned between July and January.
Set up a work programme meeting between.
Absolutely. So we'll set up a work meeting. There'll be, as I said, the task and finish group is ongoing. It's, as I said, it's a team. So they plan to report back in June. But the work programme is established.
Yeah, one of the things we were considering looking at maybe in the autumn was looking at funding and how some of the grants have been spent over the past 2-3 years. UK SPF, sorry, I'm struggling to remember that particular acronym. So a review of UK SPF funding, success stories and management and future funding models moving forward. Thank you very much. The next meeting is now Tuesday, 25th of June. That's just before 4:45. We're closed. Thank you very much. We'll stop the recording. Thank you.